Hello, everyone, and welcome to the August 2021 Talking Team webinar. My name is Nilu Parvanashtiani, and I'll be helping with the facilitation of today's webinar. This webinar is sponsored by the Federal Highway Administration and hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence. So we at NOCO are very grateful of the Federal Highway team who help organize the Talking Team webinar series each month. So just quick reminders before we start. On your screen right now, you can see a Talking Team web links where you can access previous webinar recordings and other resources related to the Talking Team and team in general. You can also see a NOCO useful links that's for reaching to resources that we have at the center about transportation system management and operations, news and resources. And then on the bottom of that, you can see a download pod where we have resources related to this webinar and also the PDF of the presentation that we have. A few other logistics I wanted to mention is that we are recording this webinar as usual, and that recording and the presentation slides will also be available on our website in the on-demand learning section of it. And then your phone is on listen-only mode, but just like you're doing right now, please use that question discussion pod for any comments and also for any questions that you have during the presentation. Just please type them up, as it's fresh in your mind, and then at the end we have time dedicated for question and answer, and our moderator will cover those. And that's all I had with the logistics, and with that I'll hand it over to Jim Ostrich, who will be our moderator for today. Jim.
Thank you, Nilu, and as always, thank you to the National Operations Center of Excellence. Their support to Federal Highway is so valuable, and Adam Hops, the acting executive director, and especially Nilu, again, she is fantastic in her support to us. To everyone, again, welcome. And on behalf of the U.S. DOT, Federal Highway Administration, Office of Operations, Joe Tebow, Paul Joden, and myself, we are grateful that you continue to be available, make yourselves available for all the Talking Tim webinars. We today, as usual, have a great agenda for you. And before I get started, I tell you what, I'm going to get started, and then I'll say what I was going to say here in a moment. Ahead of the presentations and the Federal Highway update, you can see here that today's webinar, besides the update, we have 4 distinguished speakers and TIM leaders and champions for sure. And starting with Patrick Chavez, who's the Mountain Corridor Operations Manager for Colorado DOT, who'll speak on establishing local TIM programs. Of course, David McDonald from TxDOT, the TIM coordinator, statewide coordinator, talking about the TIM training requirement curriculum for Texas law enforcement, and of course Chief Covington, who we haven't heard from in a while, but I'll just say Fire Chief Covington of Schertz Fire Rescue retired. He was instrumental in the TIM training becoming required curriculum through the Texas Fire Commission. So he's going to talk a little bit about how that was accomplished. And last but not least, Scott Malcolm, who's going to talk about the curriculum requirement that was done in Georgia for all EMS professionals in that state. And Scott hails from Parsons Corporations. And then we'll hopefully have Q&A. As far as updates, Wednesday, September 1st, from 2 to 3, we're going to have, there's going to be a webinar on the traffic incident management self-assessment that Paul's been leading from Federal Highway for a number of years. No registration required, but an important part of our program that is the self-assessment. And then on the 8th of September, we're going to have another hour-long discussion about the Crash Responder Safety Week, which is our newly branded title for what used to be National Traffic Incident Response Awareness Week. The All States webinar, many of you have participated, and we ask you to keep coming and being on there. Some of the activities are redundant, you're reporting out on, but more and more states are now joining. We're about 3 months out from that special week where we honor responders, November 8th through the 14th this year, the second week in November every year. But we now know, and it's official, it's CRSW, Crash Responder Safety Week. So join us for that. And now, let's see, the National TIM Responder Training Update, which we're still in the process of updating the curriculum. So for Crash Responder Safety Week, a few more valuable pieces of information that during that week, thanks to Vishali Shah and the team over at AEM, our contractor extraordinaire with Matt and Amira, I have to give them a shout out, the team over at AEM, developing and supporting the public education and outreach for all things traffic incident management. But it's been special now that it's even more special now, I should say, for Crash Responder Safety Week. And you can see the breakdown of what we're doing that whole week, starting out with proclamations, slow down, move over, responder training, honoring veterans because it's Veterans Day, and on Friday, recognizing the responders, and then Saturday, traffic incident awareness, followed by Sunday, driver education. We've managed to get some, not as many as we want or we need, the contacts, the information for your public information officers, communications office point of contacts. This is important because Federal Highways Public Affairs Office will be engaging with them, but we have time. So if you share that contact with myself and Paul, Joe, and importantly, Vishali Shah, we would be immensely grateful. The toolkits, you can see here some of the activities and initiatives, I guess, that are becoming available. And potential, there's an example there, potential driver education tweet, for example, so on and so forth. So next month, we have already 3 presenters you can see here. Joe Tebow, my colleague who's on with us today. By the way, Paul wasn't able to join us today, but Joe Tebow from our team is with us, and he leads the first bullet there for the TIM Rural Environments Project. And Martha Eddy, who's the program manager for the prime contractor Patel, will be presenting, and followed by Jamie Sullivan. As you can see, she's Director of National Center for Rural Road Safety, Western Transportation Institute, Montana State University, on rural road safety and the role of TIM. And last but not least, Megan Negren, who's the training program coordinator for the LTAP. She's phenomenal. You're going to enjoy all 3 of these, but my gosh, Megan, I believe located in Iowa, or maybe it's Illinois, or maybe Indiana, I forgot now. apologize. Just great hearing her during our Rural TIM project discussions. Again, that's being led by Joe Tebow of the TIM team at Federal Highway. So let's see. Nilu, I guess my slides are up next. Thank you. So what I was going to say earlier, I want to ask for 30 seconds of silence here because we are just 4 shy of last year's record number of responders struck by vehicle fatalities. So for the next 30 seconds, let's be silent and pray and just honor them and their families and whatnot. Okay, thank you. Next slide. This report, as the latest report, pat yourselves on the back, almost at 550,000 responders trained since that summer beginning of the National Responder Training Program. So kudos to everyone, and keep doing what you're doing because there's a lot going on still, even with the pandemic. Here's the map showing the web-based below the number above, which is the in-person training by state. If anybody's interested in more details about this that isn't on the national roster to receive this report, I apologize, but I just want you to know you can always reach out to Joe, Paul, or myself to ask questions. This is the total, the map showing the total by states. We always mention too, by the way, as I go through the slides here, that we're always in the rears. We're finding out that academies and just states trainers aren't reporting the numbers. So who knows? We could probably easily be at 600,000 or more, truth be known. So that number down in the lower left, as you've heard us say, our quest or our march or our mission to reach over 1 million responders, it never stops. And so important that you as leaders continue to do what you're doing. And so the goal is going to change, just FYI, to 50% in the new fiscal year, FY22, which for us starts in October 1st. Don't forget, like Nilu said, if you have any questions throughout the presentations, please type them in the chat pod, and we'll do our best to field all of those. I included this slide this time. Sometimes I don't, because I want to give an extra shout out to the fire rescue EMS world, because you take their two numbers, 231 plus the 48, that's just shy of 300,000. Not that law enforcement hasn't done a phenomenal job at 35% with 137,000, and of course towers and transportation public works, but I think I mentioned it before, the fire rescue's really been doing a great job nationally. This slide I added, remember the training is at no cost, by and large everywhere across the country, whether in person and or the web-based versions at the National Highway Institute, our friends over at Emergency Responder Safety Institute, Responder Training Learning Network. the TIM certificate there, and of course I added the URL for the TIM program and the very important TIM training point of contacts list. And I added the CARMA, which is Cooperative Automation. Now I forgot what the R stands for, but everything, the program that we have, I should say, collaborating with Turner Fairbanks Highway Research Center, our research center for all things connected vehicle / autonomous vehicle. I thought it'd be of interest. It might be of interest for folks that want to visit that site and see research mobility, cooperative automation, research mobility application. Presentations are available too. They're all on the, I believe, all the presentations, including this information, is on the webinar today. So again, Paul, Joe, myself, we're here to be of service. And with that, Vishali, our first presenter, is Patrick Chavez, as I said. And Patrick, you can further introduce yourself. So take it away.
All right. Thanks, Jim. So just wanted to make a little correction. I was introduced earlier in the webinar that I was a Mountain Operations Manager. That was my first job at CDOT. I transitioned over and I took over the statewide Traffic Incident Management Program Coordinator position back in 2018. So even though I'm now in the statewide, I still have an affinity for the Mountain Operations Managers, and I really learned a lot in that position, the benefits of a good TIM program. And that's one of the things that I brought over to the program coordinator position when I came here. Katie and Jim asked me to just give a quick overview and show some of the progressions of our TIM teams and our TIM program here in Colorado. So hopefully I can get that information out and you guys can see some of the benefits that we're seeing. As with CDOT, we work really closely with Colorado State Patrol. I work with Major Marone over there, and we really have a lot of the same goals, and we were working together to provide a more effective state-level support to the local TIM teams that are out there. And that's what we call our TIM groups that here in Colorado as TIM teams. So we have 27 identified TIM teams throughout Colorado. There's a mix of different maturities of TIM teams that are out there. Some are really good, and we've taken a lot of lessons learned from them and working to get those lessons learned to some of the other TIM teams that are at a little lower level of maturity. We also have different areas. So I'm sure many of you in different states understand we have urban TIM teams or interstate and corridor-based TIM teams that are in the more populated areas. But then we also have quite a few of the area-based TIM teams or the rural TIM teams that don't deal with the heavier populations, and sometimes they have bigger challenges that you don't see in the urban areas. And that's really what one of the challenges that we worked with, Major Marone and myself, as far as supporting the TIM teams, is how do we best support them and find those unifying lessons learned to help them to improve and maturity of their TIM teams. So we really, the effort to develop a formal statewide TIM program started back in 2017. There was a concern at that time because there was an increasing number of first responders that were being injured on scenes, and of course we had several responders that had been killed. At that time, over an 18-month period, we had 3 state troopers that had been killed on incident scenes. So there was a big concern about what are we doing and can we do it better and safer. So in 2017, there was a governor's task force that was created, and this really, the goal of that task force and the recommendations that came out of that was to encourage the responders in Colorado to move from an individual agency response and to start working and training together to be safer And the mantra that we came out of there was the one scene, one culture, save lives. As part of this mantra, we were really looking at what can we do to bring the local agencies and the local responders together to work more effectively, and at the end of the day, to be safer. At the same time, Chief Packard, the chief of the Colorado State Patrol, he issued a directive to all of his troops that every troop captain would develop and implement an effective TIM team. So CDOT we went and were trying to be supportive of that, and we saw that we wanted to be part of the solution and work together more proactively with CSP, but also with the local agencies. So we were right there with CSP, working to develop these effective TIM teams throughout the state. At the time, there was a lot of local efforts going on. We had quite a few TIM team champions out there. If you're in Colorado, you probably are familiar with like Bart Triple and Chris Ukowitz and some of the other TIM champions that were in place. Major Marone from CSP was also one of those TIM champions. He and Sergeant Triple were instrumental in creating a really effective program up in the Northeast on North I-25 corridor up from Denver to Wyoming. Even though we had those local champions, we really wanted to support and develop that statewide program and get some of the lessons learned and program goals to develop TIM teams throughout the state. So as part of this effort, we developed a TIM team workbook, and this was introduced in September of last year. And this really brings a lot of those lessons learned and creates a roadmap for TIM teams to see where they're at and start working, identifying how they want to work to improve their TIM teams. As part of the workbook, we have a lot of different areas in there. It shows some of these lessons learned, and in there one graph that really kind of brings everything together and shows what we're trying to do. So it highlights the cycle that we want a lot of our TIM teams to follow throughout the state. And the first major step is to find out what partners are participating and who needs to be brought in. In some cases, like I said here, a lot of local agencies already had effective working relationships, but just the teams were not formalized. So by identifying who was there, who needed to be added, and it helped to work, push us into developing these TIM teams. And again, CSP and CDOT were kind of the common denominators. We were in every TIM team, so we really took the lead in how we developed and improved these teams. Next step was to do a self-assessment and just figure out how to, where the status of those TIM teams were. So rather than recreate the wheel, we just went back and we said, well, FHWA has already produced a self-assessment document, so we're going to use that. So what we did was we just turned around and took that same self-assessment. We do that already with the Denver metro area, but we took that same self-assessment and gave it to all the TIM teams and made it a goal last year that these TIM teams would complete that self-assessment. So of the 27 TIM teams that we have identified, 19 of them were completed that self-assessment. We struggled with the last one, but I think a lot of it was just the COVID restrictions that we had last year really kind of hampered some of our efforts. But that doesn't mean that we're going to stop on that one. We still think that self-assessment is a great starting point for all these TIM teams really to identify where they're at and where they need to go. And of course, we're excited that there's going to be a rural version that comes out this year. So we're going to be handing that out to our TIM teams as we go forward. Within our TIM team workbook, this was based, a lot of it was based on the 40X principles, the 4 disciplines of execution. And so this year we contracted with Franklin Covey, who is responsible for 40X, to provide additional training for CDOT and CSP. And that really working with them to help them better understand the workbook. The first part of that was get with the state leadership team and develop a wildly important goal. And the goal that we determined on this year was to reduce struck by incidents for both CDOT and CSP from an average of 37 to 30 by this year. So that is what we have in place and are working forward as we work with the TIM teams, but also as we look at the state level, we can look at our performance measures and our progression. So once we developed the statewide goal, we went back and started working with the TIM teams and their leaders, the CDOT and CSP leadership, and working to develop their goals at their level. So we're really encouraging them to develop goals that are relevant and unique to each team. One thing that we were trying to get them to understand is that their goal needs to be relevant and it needs to talk to their team. So we have really been working hard to get that piece done and work with the teams to develop those goals so that we can start to working for them to get the performance measures as well as start seeing where the progression is. Again, we went back to that TIM self-assessment and used that to help develop their goals and ensure that their goals were supporting the statewide goal. This is a quick shot of where we're at. The majority of the teams have created their goals, and we're working with the other teams that have not finished their goals to get them created and then continue to the development of those goals. Once you got the goals, now it's put the plan into action and put it into practice, and that's what we've started doing. We were working with the different TIM teams so they can understand what they're doing and move their programs forward. And even as we're working with the teams and putting their plans into practice and their goals into practice, of course, we're looking at what's the next step. So as we continue to assess and adjust our programs, we continue to look to find out what our next step will be. And not only at the TIM team, so with the TIM teams, we are working to document and formalize what they're doing in the TIM plans. We're working with to develop a schedule so that we can update TIM plans over every 4 years. So there's some TIM teams that already have a TIM plan. Those will just be working to update them, and of course, developing TIM plans for the TIM teams that do not have them. And with the First Responder Executive Committee, that's what was developed as part of the task force, the governor's task force. This provides a state-level effort, and we're working with the executive committee to develop products and guidance to support the local TIM teams and their programs and help them to improve. So, as I said, we do a lot of things from the state level to try to support the local teams and continue really to help them continue with their progression and improve and become better. One of the big things that we do is that we have a TIM team website, or a TIM website. And this really is a at the time, it's a public-facing website. We have different documents on there. We have resources that are available to the TIM teams, and a calendar to show when teams are meeting and to show when other events are occurring. Really, we were trying to develop this where it's a one-stop shop. Anybody that has any questions or needs information about the TIM program or their TIM teams, they can go to this website. One of the things that we're looking at in the future is to develop a more secure website login that will allow the TIM teams to use this as a more collaborative effort, so they can start putting some of their meeting notes, their TIM plans, AARs onto the secure portal, and they'll have that available, and they can use that to not only work within their TIM teams, but also to kind of have a forum with other TIM teams throughout the state. So we're working on that and hope to have that up and running here soon. We also have a TIM track that we have in place in just southwest of Denver here in Colorado. We went to Tennessee back in 2016 to take a look at their TIM track. That was the first TIM track in the nation, and we took a lot of the lessons learned and a lot of the ideas from that TIM track and brought it back to Colorado and started working on our TIM track here. We worked that in conjunction with CSP and our Douglas County partners, and we built and dedicated our TIM track back in April of 2018. Saying it similar to Tennessee, this is provides a area to do live training. So our goal is to continue to do that training from first arrival to final action. And we do a lot of things out there on the TIM track, all the way from push, bumper, and rollover training up to multi-agency training. Our goal is to continue to increase the use of the TIM track and develop more training scenarios and a curriculum that will support not only training here at this track, but allow us to take the training to other locations throughout Colorado. We also do a Colorado TIM conference. This month, or actually September 22nd, we're going to do our 5th annual TIM conference. And we've had really good success with our TIM conferences. Last year we had over 140 people that registered as participants, and we had consistently over 120 people within the different sessions and the presentations that we did. This year we're doing it again. Our theme for this year is, of course, communication, and we're really trying to focus on that third nug: prompt, reliable, and interoperable communication. But we're found that this has been a really good event. We had to do it virtual last year, and we're doing it virtual again this year. And even though we're doing it virtual, there's still a lot of good information that we provide to the TIM teams throughout the state and how to increase and improve their programs. And what are the future we're looking at? So obviously, one of the big things, and we found that with the development of our goals, is making sure that we have the data to support that and to help create performance measures. So one of the things that we're doing at CDOT is that we're currently working to develop and field a new advanced traffic management system. And one of the things that we'll have within there is better tracking of the TIM T times, so we know when the incidents occur, and then when the different agencies get there, and then as we begin to clear it, we can start documenting that information and create that data for the different TIM teams. But also, we're looking to have a capability for integration with partner agency systems, with the different CADs and other systems that agencies run, so that we can share information more effortlessly. We're also working with, again, the statewide executive committee and the subcommittees that are within that executive committee for developing products and guidance, both for the statewide teams and how they can improve their programs. We have 4 subcommittees. I got them on the list. So we have the TIM teams subcommittee, the education campaign, the policies, procedures, and we just started up the training operations. And we have one of the sergeants from CSP who's going to be leading that. We're real excited. He's already got a lot of great ideas on how we can increase the training and provide more operational support for these TIM programs. We're also looking at increasing our TIM training. When I started in 2018, the TIM training in Colorado was 44%, and you saw the slide that Jim just showed. We're now at 59%. So we're real excited at the number of people that we're going to train, but we're also looking at how do we continue that training. So whether it's developing advanced and refresher TIM training opportunities, but also looking at how do we develop the multi-agency training opportunities. We're working to develop some AAR and tabletop training modules. And then we're also going to steal Jim and Paul's idea, and we're looking at developing some Colorado Talking TIM webinars for Colorado-specific topics about traffic incident management. All this is just how we transition from the TIM teams from a champion-based to an institutionalized culture. And that's really what we want, where it's not reliant on a single or a group of people, but it's more of the agency's culture, and they're ready to really assume and keep the TIM program alive and keep it moving forward. And I think that puts me at the end. So, Jim, again, appreciate the opportunity to kind of give a quick snapshot of our TIM program, and if there's any questions, I'm definitely open to providing any information.
Patrick, thank you. I just love the presentation. It really covered the majority, if not all, the bases on how demonstrating a successful statewide TIM program. My goodness. I know a lot of times when, it helps, obviously, when a state police colonel or a DOT secretary or whatnot, and others are behind you, and you have the track. You just have so many components, the website and just all of it. I hope everybody, we're able to get some valuable nuggets from your presentation, and thanks for the correction to your new role as statewide TIM coordinator, and everything you do, Patrick.
All right. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. So
hey, Jim.
Next up, yes.
Jim, it's Paul.
Paul?
Can I just jump in 1 second there?
Of
I
course.
just, my heart went pitter-patter on how the self-assessment was being used perfectly. Not only do you have 27 teams, but the self-assessment, that's just the way it should be used. You get a baseline and you think about what we can do to improve for the next coming months, and so we appreciate that. And I think, Jim, did you mention that September 1st we have a webinar on kicking off the annual self-assessment period? I think you might have a slide.
At the front end, we sure did.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry I joined late. So that's all, Jim. Thank you.
No. You kidding? Good comments, Paul. Thanks for being with us. So next up, our dear friend and Dave McDonald, who's retired law enforcement in Texas and also the statewide coordinator for his state. And with that, David, take it away.
Thank you, Jim. And man, what a great presentation from Patrick there in Colorado. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little envious of some of the things they got there, especially with that track and 27 TIM teams. I mean, that's pretty impressive. So good work there.
It is.
So as Jim mentioned earlier, we're one of the few states, I think, that actually has traffic incident management training required for both fire and police officers here in the state of Texas. And Chief Covington, that you'll hear after me, will share how that got implemented for the fire agency, and then I'm here to share how we got that implemented for the police departments here. But make sure you listen up to Chief Covington. He actually came to Texas a few years ago and taught a really big class here in Austin. I think we had over 40 students, and so he's one of the reasons I'm actually qualified to teach the training. So let's get into how this actually transpired here in our state of Texas for police officers. So back in around April of 2018, we had a TxDOT commissioner, but they kind of oversee our organization. I think there's 6 of those over our organization. And he was driving in Austin on Loop 1, which is called MoPac, and was stuck in traffic. And as he started approaching the scene, he observed that as a minor crash, blocking a couple of lanes due to the fire truck being out there, that in his opinion could have been moved to either to the shoulder or completely off the roadway. So he actually reached out to our executive director to inquire, why it wasn't moved and things of that nature. And so some people within the traffic safety division, me being one of them, were called in to respond to the commissioner's request. And so we did come up with some ideas and some strategies, but at the end of the day, we did have to let him know that TxDOT does not work crashes. That's actually on the local agency could do to help implement that. So with that information, then our commissioner reached out to the governor's office, and they sent that on down to our state police, the Department of Public Safety, and they really felt the need to take on this task. One of the things that they were already doing, our DPS agency was already teaching this 4-hour traffic incident management training in their academies. So they already saw the value in this, and so they decided to take this on. But what they realized is not everybody that had been through the academy prior to them teaching it had the training. So they felt the need to get more folks trained. And so anyways, they developed a plan. And starting in March of 2019, they had 2 trainers, and I'm going to give their name. They played a critical role in how this got implemented and why we have it in our academies today. And anyways, it was Sergeant Kenneth Morgan, and also Sergeant Cesar Villarreal from DPS. And So they came up with this plan to do these trainers across the state to not only train their DPS troopers to be able to give the 4-hour training, but also other law enforcement agencies in the 6 areas that they had chosen to do these trainers. They also brought me on board to assist in that, knowing that I was a trainer, but also that this is my full-time job. You know, they also have other jobs within their agency. They're both crash reconstructionists, so they get called out for fatality investigations and have to work on those, as well as sergeants over a shift in their in their own parts of the state. So they wear many different hats. So they wanted someone that was full-time that could actually respond to questions and stuff. So during this process, they also reached out to our Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, which we call TCOLE, and that's our state licensing agency for all police officers in Texas, to get the training, the 4-hour traffic incident management training into the academy, but also in-service training. And a lot of you folks may know that as continuing education, but police officers in Texas must get 40 hours every 2 years. Well, TCO agreed to put it in a basic peace officer certification course, but they did not make it a requirement for anyone that was not, for anyone that was already out of the academy. They did not make it part of the in-service requirement. So, they did send it out as part of the new curriculum, and it got approved. There was no dissension from anyone in the state. So, as part of the curriculum that went into effect on September 1st of 2019, but it was not actually a requirement until April of 2020. So as people started seeing the new requirement, they knew that they needed instructors. So what we realized is we had a lack of instructors around our state. So anyways, the phone calls started coming in, the emails started coming in because I was a state point of contact. People requesting this training. So we actually did our first in-person train the trainer in Houston, Texas back in October of 2019. And after that, we had another 6 additional train the trainers through January of 2020. And then the pandemic hit, and then we've had 3 virtual train the trainers. And through those 10 classes, we've got 162 instructors trained. So these include not just people that teach at their own agencies' police academies, but also any local colleges that maybe have a regional police academy that they teach for the region. And so all of them did their own instructors. So obviously this is a picture from one of our train the trainers when we're doing in-person trainings. And then this is one from one of our virtual trainings. I believe this is one of our virtual trainings back in November of 2020. And I will note this, I do remember seeing those reports that the FHWA puts out with our 10 training stats. We were the reason they actually had to put a virtual training course on there because we were one of the first ones to do a virtual train the trainer. So with that, that's how we actually got it into our certification for basic police officers, basic police officer certifications. Our next goal is to make it mandatory for in-service training, which we hope that we can get that implemented next year. So with that, Jim, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, David. Another excellent presentation, and I hope folks, again, are paying close attention because there are few states, Texas and Kentucky that you'll hear about. Georgia that you'll hear about. Actually, no, and Kentucky both have mandated the training for emergency medical service personnel, paramedics, and EMTs, but Texas still remains the only one where both firefighters as well as, and that's career and volunteer firefighters, I might add, and law enforcement through TCOLE, Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. And David's been trailblazing for sure, conducting his monthly webinars with all his state regional coordinators, I think you call them, right, David?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Yeah. So again, this is a big deal, and this is what we should all be aiming for. This, I always say one person, and amazing what one leader, one champion can do, but certainly bring in your closest friends, if you will, in the business and to help you out. So with that, retired Chief David Covington from Schertz, Texas, is going to talk about how the firefighter side happened in Texas. That is the mandate for the training. So with that, Chief.
Okay, Jim, thank you. Thanks for having me. Good stuff, David and Patrick. Learned a lot on that stuff. I was going to tell you a little bit about how it became mandatory in Texas for firefighters to have the training. So let me start with the Texas Commission on Fire Protection. It's a state agency appointed by the governor. It regulates the nearly 30,000 paid firefighters in the state of Texas, and they have the Firefighter Advisory Committee that makes recommendations to that commission, to the board. And so it's with the Firefighter Advisory Committee that we started back in 2015. Let me see. And it just so happened that at that time, actually in 2010, the State Fire Commission adopted the National Fallen Firefighters Courage to Be Safe program, which really targeted firefighter safety. Wanted firefighters to become intently aware that they controlled their own safety. And they had 16 life safety initiatives in that Courage to Be Safe. It's important to mention this program because the commission made the training mandatory for continuing education in the state in 2010 and gave all fire departments 5 years to complete the training. So here we were in 2015, and we thought we would tie our objectives with Sharp 2 to the objectives of the Courage to Be Safe program. I went before the advisory board to make a presentation, and the intent was to get their endorsement. We were in Texas at that time, we were at about 1,000 trained first responders, all disciplines. Training was moving slowly, it seemed at that time. And we just wanted to get the word out. I thought putting it on their agenda, maybe getting a little notice and hopefully an endorsement would be something that would help us along. So I tied it to the Courage to Be Safe. As you can see, the number one objective there is changing attitudes. Well, I can tell you there was a lot of attitude on the roadway back in 2015 about how crashes should be handled. We didn't even call them traffic incident management. They were just working a crash. And you can see the risk management number 3 initiative aligns very closely with Sharp 2 in their situational awareness. Know your surroundings. Those D drivers are out to get you. Look out. And of course, the next 2 deal with the training itself. It should be a nationally recognized program. It should have minimal standards. And Sharp 2 has proved itself to be the nationally recognized standard and I think even internationally recognized standard for traffic incident management. So I'm making the case to the state fire, not the commission yet, but making the case to the advisory committee, and the chairman interrupted me, and he started to talk to his colleagues on the board, on the committee, and said, I don't think we can endorse training. If we don't require it and we don't mandate it, how do we endorse somebody else's training? It's not our training. And my heart sunk. They began to talk. Thankfully, I didn't say anything. And as they continued to talk, one of them said, why don't we just make it mandatory? Our Courage to Be Safe initiative ends this year, December of 2015. Why don't we just start it back up again with this Sharp 2 training and make it mandatory, the same, using the same parameters we did for the Courage to Be Safe program. And those parameters were not to include it in the new firefighter training curriculum, but to make it a continuing education requirement phased in over 5 years. In other words, each department had 5 years to complete it to see all their people had the training. And any new person coming in had to have had the training within 1 year after assignment to a regulated department. It was about that time that we tabled the motion, and they sent me to the back of the room with some of their staff, and I started making phone calls. I think the first phone call was to Jim Ostrich there in D.C., and I think the conversation went something like, "Hey, Jim, this is Dave down in Texas, and you ain't going to believe this, but I think they're going to make it mandatory for the training in Texas if we can do certain things." And some of those things were to make sure that the training was widespread available, make sure that it was available through different avenues. So Jim helped me out a lot with that. There were several phone calls back and forth, several phone calls to Ron Moore up in North Texas, one of the authors of the training. And he had done training up there for a while. He helped me out with some equivalencies there. And by the end of the day, and then on later, before it was presented to the commission, we had a package that we could go forward with. And so in August of 2015, the commission adopted Rule 435.29 that all regulated fire protection personnel must complete the Federal Highway Administration Traffic Incident Management Program or an equivalent that is approved by the commission prior to December 1st, 2020. And so that took care of the paid firefighters and the regulated fire departments. But there were that many or more volunteer firefighters in the state of Texas. Now, fortunately, we had the State Firemen's and Fire Marshals Association in the state that most of the volunteer firefighters, many of them, were members of the State Firemen's and Fire Marshals Association. And that association had a voluntary certification program to certify firefighters to the same level as the State Fire Commission, so that a volunteer firefighter could get certified under their program and then possibly go to work for a regulated fire department, and that training would be accepted. And so the State Firemen's and Fire Marshals Association said, well, if the state's going to do it, then to stay concurrent with what their requirements are, we're going to do it too. And so they made the Federal Highway Short 2 training part of their curriculum with the same time frame for the completion. And I can tell you, back in 2015, I was a little hesitant. I mean, I was glad that we were getting this, obviously, but I was a little bit concerned. 5 years, wow, it's going to take. We're giving everybody 5 years to complete this. Seemed like a long time. Well, time flies. I think the takeaways. Every state's different. Everybody's going to have their own challenges and avenues to get this training institutionalized. And I really like that in Patrick's presentation when he said their intent was to take it from champion-based to institutionalized training. But what worked in Texas was we related the Shark 2 objectives easily, related those objectives to that nationally recognized standard in the National Fallen Firefighters Courage to Be Safe program. We allowed flexibility in meeting that mandatory training, and then not through my actions, but really through the actions of the State Firemen's and Fire Marshals Association, it made it relevant to the volunteer firefighters. And not all volunteer firefighters are in that firefighter certification program, but we know that when they do that training for those seeking that certification, it almost always includes other volunteer firefighters. And so we were getting our foot into the door through the volunteer associations a little more than, a lot more than we would have before. So we started with, when we were at about 1,000 first responders trained in 2015. The last I saw, Texas now has over 51,000 trained first responders. We're at 65% of our goal and still working at it. So that's all I have on the firefighter side, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. You took me down memory lane that infamous day. Exciting that it was, and thankful to you and Ron Moore and others, and as well as David earlier mentioned the sergeant from TCOLE that helped as well on the law enforcement side, by the way. So thanks again, Chief, and I hope everybody's taking notes here. Again, what I said, here Dave wasn't expecting things to happen so quickly, and it did. And the next month it was official, July 15 to August 15, and bam, there it was. Next up, and I do see some questions in the chat box, but maybe we'll have a few minutes to address those. Thanks for those that are already fielding them. Next up is Scott Malcolm. You can see he's the senior team TIM specialist for Atkins Global in the great state of Georgia, and he's going to share, as I said earlier, how the mandate for EMS providers occurred. So with that, Scott.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that, and thanks for having me today. So just real quick, a little side story for David McDonald, and for the group. This is kind of a funny story, but still a story that gives him an idea of how well his efforts are playing out in the state of Texas. A colleague of mine and I were making that long run from Artesia, New Mexico, where we did a train-the-trainer at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And Jim and Paul, that's a discussion that we can have amongst ourselves on the side. Essentially, all federal law enforcement officers are getting Sharp 2 in their basic training now. But I digress. So we delivered that training in Artesia, New Mexico at the FLESI facility there, and we're on our way back to El Paso to catch a flight back to Atlanta. And we were on one of those, classic Southwest Texas desert highway where you can do 114 miles an hour or so, and you don't see a car for miles and miles, and it's all straight and basically flat. And sure enough, we got spotted by a Texas State police officer who stopped us. And my background is fire, and my colleague that was with me is retired law enforcement. And as we're stopping for this nice police officer, we both looked at each other and said, I wonder if he's going to make a non-traffic side approach. And sure enough, as we got the words out of our mouth, he came up on the non-traffic side, and we identified ourselves and congratulated him for that, and thanked him for taking the non-traffic side approach. And we explained to him who we were and what we were doing, and he said, yeah, it's funny, I literally just took that class a week ago. So Dave McDonald, there you go. Your efforts are paying off in the state of Texas. So good job. Kudos to you guys out there. So real quick, just a background on who I am and quick history of our program here in the state of Georgia. As I mentioned.
Did he give you a ticket?
No, no, he didn't. He very generous and gave us some professional courtesy, and we actually had a couple laughs together. But he did issue us a warning.
Okay. Didn't mean to interrupt, but I had to know that answer. Okay.
No, that's fine. That's no problem at all. So anyway, so I like I said, I'm a retired fire department firefighter here in Metro Atlanta, and just on the north side of Atlanta. In fact, my department that I retired from, we border the city of Atlanta. I spent 30 years working in a very, very high traffic congestion. If you know Atlanta or have been here, we have two major interstate highways. That one is a perimeter highway around the city, and the other one's I-75 that goes through the city. And I was kind of right in the corridor of the two there. Spent most of my career there, so I spent a lot of time standing on the interstates and dodging traffic and trying to keep my folks safe out there on the roadway. But I also spent 32 years as a paramedic in the state of Georgia, and retired in 2015. Went to work for Jim mentioned in the introduction, the beginning of this session, that I was with Parsons. And actually, that is correct. I was with Parsons at that time, and the Parsons was the contracted consultancy to the Georgia DOT at that time for everything traffic incident management related. And that contract actually transitioned to Atkins in summer of 2020, and I transitioned with it. So yes, I'm the, for lack of a better term, I'm coordinating state efforts for the TIM program. We have an entire team that helps us out, but I more or less oversee the TIM program and training, and I oversee our Metro Atlanta Freeway Service Patrol group, our HERO group, is what we call them, Highway Emergency Response Operators, and our TRIP program, our Towing Recovery Incentive Program in Georgia, which is a very, very successful program. And if anybody wants to chat about that, I'll be happy to, if you want to bring it to your state if you don't have it already. So we had the program in Georgia started essentially in 2002, when we formed a group, got together and formed the Georgia, or at that time it was called the Metro Atlanta TIME, or Traffic Incident Management Enhancement Task Force. In the state funded all that. Georgia Department of Transportation was very aggressive and funded all that, and believed in the program, believed in what we were doing, and it worked very well in Metro Atlanta. And in 2017, we took the effort statewide because of the success in the Atlanta area. And what we did, we basically, I don't know how well you can see the graphic on the screen there. We divided the state up into 15 what we call TIM regions. And each one of those 15 TIM regions does currently have an active TIM team, and there are several local TIM teams within those TIM regions. So as we continue to progress Sharp 2 throughout the state, try to continue to spread the word and deliver the training statewide, we looked at the different organizations, and fire was by and large way ahead of all the other disciplines as far as getting their folks trained. And part of that we realized was it's easy to do, because typically you can do a 4-hour block of Sharp 2 at a fire agency in a particular county, and they can send a group that are of firefighters that are on duty to the training. We started talking about the EMS side of things, and EMS in Georgia is probably not a lot different from a number of other states. We have a handful of EMS agencies that are tied to fire departments, are part of a fire department, which makes it easy because they're going to get the training as the firefighters get it too. But we have a number of EMS agencies that are small, either large or small private operations, and we also have some that are our primary EMS provider in the city of Atlanta. Grady Health System is a hospital run. It's a government, primarily government run, but it's a hospital based EMS service. So we had a lot of different nuts to crack, if you will, within the EMS community as far as different organizations, types of organizations. And, we had everything from, like I said, the big government organizations down to, Joe and his brother in a 1968 Cadillac hearse that they converted to an ambulance, and they were providing EMS service in whatever their corner of rural Georgia was. So we looked at the options, and I can't take credit for starting this effort. this was a colleague of mine, a good friend of mine, Danny Thompson, and some of you probably know. Danny is now the fire chief in Dawson County and a little further north of Atlanta. But Danny actually had the idea and started the effort to approach the Department of Public Health, who oversees all EMS operations and EMS certification and that sort of thing in the state of Georgia. And he approached at that time, the Department of Public Health, the Emergency Health Section, as we call it, Director Keith Wages, about this idea to institutionalize Sharp 2 training in the EMS community, because we were seeing the difficulties of trying to get it out there, get it to those folks who are on duty. You know, in order to go to training, they have to take a truck out of service or pay their folks to go. You pay them overtime to go off duty and those sorts of things. So Danny approached Keith Wages about this idea, and the interesting and good news is that at that time, Keith Wages was on the State Time Task Force Board of Directors. So Keith was well involved, well engaged, and well familiar with the TIM efforts in the state and with the Sharp 2 program. He had taken the training himself at one point. So he bought into it very readily as the statewide director. And there was a little time elapsed because there's so many other things that were going on at the time within the Department of Public Health that sort of distracted him and took his attention other places. But the long story short is, I followed up with him in 2018. We kind of revisited the idea, and he said, "Yeah," he said, "I should have gotten this taken care of already." And long and the short of it is, he instituted a statewide policy, and I have a little clip of it there on the screen. Statewide policy was issued to all EMS providers. Anybody that's licensed to provide EMS at any level in the state of Georgia. It doesn't matter if they're on an ambulance or if they're working in a hospital scenario some way, or an office, or whatever the case may be. If they are simply a trainer, they're all required now to take the 4-hour block of Sharp 2. And of course, they can take it online or they can take it in person. We prefer to deliver it in person because you get that, you guys know, you get the personal interaction when you're delivering an in-person class versus an online class. But we directed them to the NHI website as an option, or respondersafety.com, and they took it, through one of those avenues or in person. And here's what the directive actually states. The scope essentially is saying it covers everybody, and they have, and it says that they have to complete the course, whether it's in person or online. And in Georgia, our EMS professionals work on every 2-year recertification cycle. So what the Department of Public Health actually did is they basically provided 2 years. This took effect in October of 2018, and they provided a 2-year cycle. So in other words, if you were due to recertify in 2020 on your cycle, you essentially had 2 years to get the training complete if you didn't have it already. And if you were due to recertify in 2019, that would have meant your next recertification cycle comes along in 2021. So they had until 2021, those folks did, to get the training complete, if that makes sense. So essentially, they had a 2-year plus window of opportunity to get this done. We weren't saying, guess what, it's going to be done in 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever. They had plenty of time to get it done. But as it's probably no surprise, at the last minute I can't tell you how many I had calling me up saying, how do I get this? How do I get this? But it has increased the numbers exponentially in Georgia for EMS providers, and you saw the graphic. I don't know if you happened to catch the numbers for Georgia when Jim was showing the nationwide numbers trained earlier, but I think that in itself had a lot to do with us achieving that number one and percentage trained and maintaining that for the last several months. So yes, we are proud of that. But again, it was a collective effort, and we thanked Keith Wages very much for taking the initiative to follow through and mandate it. And Keith actually retired about a year, 2 years ago, something like that. And David Newton, who was the deputy director at that time, has since taken over the reins of the emergency health section of Department of Public Health, and is continuing the effort and the strong support of what we're doing in the state of Georgia. So just again, it wasn't really dramatic or exciting. It played out very easily. It took a little time, like I said, but it played out easily because we had that direct connection, that direct tie to the state time task force in the director of public health for the state. So it was a natural fit, a natural flow. He bought into it, and we got it done. And just real quick to touch on a couple other things that we got going on, continuing on. We are looking at a Sharp 2 requirement for all law enforcement rotational towers. A lot of contractual things and a lot of politics involved in that, but we're having some preliminary discussions with some of the police agencies to in order for a tower to get on their rotational list, they have to have the Sharp 2. We're also looking at mandating it for working through the State Fire Academy to get it mandated for firefighters. And so you guys in Texas, I'll be probably reaching out to you for some guidance on that. And then also in the Georgia State Patrol Trooper Academy, that's already in the works. I think we had that almost completed a couple of years ago, and some things have changed within GSP, so we're still working on that effort as well. But then I mentioned our TRIP program, which already mandates Sharp 2 for all our towing and recovery incentive program participants on the towing side. So I probably went over my 5 minutes. I was trying to watch the time, but I wanted to make sure I got it done as quickly as I could and still got the information out there. And hopefully I left some time for some questions and answers. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jim and Paul, and I'm at your disposal if anybody has questions for me.
Scott, thank you. Another great presentation, exactly what we needed from you as well on the efforts to that occurred to make the TIM training mandatory for EMS in Georgia. I vaguely remember, Paul may remember him more, you mentioned Dan Thompson at the time. I don't know if he was he by chance high up in terms of the Georgia EMS hierarchy, if you will, or
no? Danny was on. Yeah, Danny at that time. Well, Danny, he's throughout his career, he was a firefighter primarily. He did some law enforcement over the years, but then wised up and came back to the fire department. But he was primarily with local Atlanta area fire and police agencies, and then he also, when he retired from the fire service, he came to Parsons as well, and that was where he was. He was my colleague at Parsons when this effort started up.
Okay, but thank you for that. So, to my point of earlier, one man on a mission. I know Paul can tell you that the National Association of State EMS Officials, NASEMSO as it's known, the executive director there, Dia Gaynor, is on our TIM executive leadership group, and I know she made an attempt to reach out to and encourage all state EMS presidents, agencies to do what you did in Georgia, and I think I mentioned the same pretty much has occurred in Kentucky. But the greater point again, it's, ladies and gentlemen, you can do these kinds of things for fire, on the fire side, on the police side. You heard Scott mention on the towing side, whether it's through the state police rotation list or otherwise. You just need to have the will. And so I ask you, do you have the will? I mean, the responder situation struck by vehicle fatalities and injuries is just horrific, and it behooves all of us to ramp up and partner or singularly do these kinds of great things to make sure that everyone goes home, as Chief Covington's slides showed earlier. I can't emphasize that enough, because I'll just say it. It's just not. It's not happening enough. I mean, we're 9 years into this, and as I said, Texas is the only one that's mandated for law and firefighters, and Georgia and Kentucky for EMS, and we have about a half a dozen or so states through the state police or highway patrol that have mandated it via a memo from the state police or highway patrol colonel, so I mean that's great, but we need to do more of this with all love and respect to everybody that's on here. We still have 75 people on the call that have stayed with us out of almost 100 today. So, question.
Hey, Jim, we have a couple
of
questions. Jim, there's a couple of questions that are both pet peeves of mine.
Is the first one from Robert Rausch?
Well, one was on crash investigation, and one was on the multidisciplinary training. Those are the ones that I
have the Robert Rausch one open, Paul.
Okay.
If that's the one you're referring to. But let's see if we can get Robert, open his mic and speak up, because I don't recognize Robert. I wanted to know what agency he was from.
While we're doing that, is that the one? Was that the one on? For some reason, the chat part has disappeared.
What can be done to stop the process of shutting down roadways?
Oh yeah. So if you don't mind, I'll comment on that. So
please.
I mean, we've been working on that for many years. Many people around the country work on that, and that there's been significant improvements by using the crash reconstruction technology, and an awareness from law enforcement of the issues when you do close down the road. There's been, because we've been part of it, right? It is seeing, I guess the attitudes or the priority of open the road change over the years, but the technology, the police are always looking for better technologies. In fact, the whole use of drones for crash reconstruction now is taking off. A lot of law enforcement agencies are doing that when they can, weather permitting. So it is an important piece, and if it's not happening in your part of the state, or your part of the country, then it's you just work with them is all I can say, because there are many counterparts that would actually tell you that it is a priority, and they do try to open it as quick as they can. But it is important that they get all the evidence, and that's why they need to close the road. There's a lot of reasons for that. So.
Good one, Paul. I'm glad you fielded that one. Was there another one you had? I think you.
This one. You and I both love this one, Jim. Is the multidisciplinary training in the multidisciplinary session. So since day one, the very day one of the research to put the training together, it had in mind the multidisciplinary training. It was for responders, by responders, but in the multidisciplinary session. That was in the statement of work right in the beginning, and we've maintained that throughout, that is an important component. and probably the most important component. However, if you can't get folks in there for whatever reason, right? There's scheduling issues. There's issues with backfill when you have someone in training and paying for the backfill and all kinds of issues. So if all you can do is discipline only in person, that's the next priority. You take what you can get, because you're still getting trained by the to the same learning objectives, the same sheet of music, if you will. So I'm glad that was brought up, but it is in a majority, Jim. We don't know how many, right? Has been trained in the multidisciplinary sessions, right, Jim?
Yeah, and yeah, Paul, I'm glad you honed in on that as well, and we can't emphasize it enough. Taking it online is better than not getting it at all. But boy, we long for the day to get back together in a classroom setting and meet and greet each other, get to know who you are, yourselves before you even meet each other out in the field in many cases, and forge lifelong relationships, which is part of the great piece of this national program that is the National TIM Responder Training. Definitely there's been a culture change and shift. I haven't heard, unless anybody knows of any, right, Paul, Joe, we haven't heard any cops arresting firefighters for blocking roads and so on. We used to hear about those tragic situations before, but I think we broke the ice there, hopefully. I hope nobody all of a sudden jumps in and starts telling us about a whole bunch of arrests, but it's happened. And it's amazing what the National Sharp 2 TIM training has done, and first and foremost for responder safety and motorist safety. So we still have 8 minutes left. Anybody else want to share?
I think they're all muted today, Jim, aren't they? They're all muted, I think.
Nilu, are they all muted? Can you open the mics if they are?
I can do that, but give me 1 second.
Thanks, Nilu.
Hey, Jim, this is Scott. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So just a thought on the multidisciplinary training. So here in Georgia, we've expanded beyond, and I'm sure a lot of states have. We've expanded beyond the traditional, group that we've targeted with Sharp 2, fire, EMS, police, that sort of thing, towers. We've actually formed a relationship with our state coroners association here in Georgia. They're taking the training, they're engaging the training. Our traffic engineers we're bringing in to the training, and we're trying to bring, whether we do it virtually or in person, we're trying to bring as many disciplines as we can into each training session, whether they're actually, road contractors or engineers or coroner, whoever. We're trying to bring all of them into the classroom together.
Great point. I love it, Scott. We talk occasionally, maybe not enough, about bringing in the coroners or medical examiners, for example, and we also encourage, even though they're not there as a matter of routine at traffic incidents, the public works and municipalities, public works teams that are out there that can support the DOTs a lot of times, especially at the local level. All those apply, as well as the engineers and the bridge and street maintenance folks that the DOTs have, because sometimes you got to bring in the cavalry, and that's what's, in some cases, the DOTs have practiced. So it's a good points, Scott. Anybody else want to chime in? Come on now. And by the way, the gentleman earlier, Roush, I forget his name. If you could type in your, if you don't mind, your agency. I would love to know your agency, Robert. Respectfully, that would be great. And thanks for joining us. Question on technology, next gen Tim. Anything UAS, CAD integration.
Jim, while we're on the topic of training, do you mind if I put a pitch in that, just a reminder to make sure your numbers get submitted to us. It's very important that we get those numbers.
I mentioned it early on, but please.
Oh, did you? Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I apologize for being late. I had another.
Oh, no, Paul. Go for it.
Another commitment, yeah.
Go for it.
I'm glad you mentioned it earlier then. Okay, sorry.
No. If you want to reiterate it, Paul, I'm perfectly fine.
We need the numbers. We need the numbers. Money. The numbers help us when we're selling our program. Believe me. So, and we know we don't get them all. We know for sure we don't get them all. So we want to emphasize that. No, I know we only have a few more minutes, but the speakers today are Tim champions. We've worked with all of them in one form or another. The institutionalization of all aspects of Tim. Patrick made that point. I think everyone made that point, but that's what this webinar was about today. But that institutionalization piece is so important, and I'm glad it was emphasized by basically all the speakers today. It was, I think that was a very important piece that was mentioned, and yeah.
Yes, indeed. Joe, any other thoughts from you? Thibault.
Joe, if you're muted, you can use *#. I know you had to reconnect, so that option is available to anyone who wants to talk on the phone. *# is the way to unmute.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
10-4.
Yeah. Okay. I was just saying, I'm sitting here in awe, listening to it all, right? And it's just amazingly great stuff, as always. Just keep pushing forward. We all know that the technology is outpacing us, but we're doing the best to keep up with it because we just keep pushing forward. So thanks to all the speakers and all the attendees and the great questions in the chat box. Just great stuff. So thank you all.
Thank you, Joe. Okay, 2 minutes left. And why don't we call it a day? And as well, on behalf of the U.S. DOT Federal Highway Administration, Office of Operations, Paul Joden, Joe Thibault, Jim Ostrich, and of course, Nilu from the National Operations Center of Excellence. Thank you all to our distinguished presenters and all our distinguished friends from around the country that continue to make Talking Tim a success. And don't forget about next month, Talking Tim, and ones following that every month. And we talked about Crash Responder Safety Week as well. A couple of you shared your PIO communications director contacts with me through email, so we appreciate that very much and look forward to hearing and seeing you next time. So with that, God bless and be safe. Keep one eye on traffic.